The dust of Redemption Valley clung to everything, a fine ochre powder that coated the weathered clapboard of Willow Creek's small bank, the drooping petals of Martha Ainsworth's tenacious roses, and the lines etched deep into Martha's own determined face. At 52, Martha had weathered more storms than the oldest oak on her property, the sprawling, fertile acres known as Whispering Willows. Losing her husband, Thomas, 5 years prior had been the fiercest of those storms, leaving her a widow but also the sole proprietor of the most valuable piece of land in the valley. Whispering Willows bordered the creek that gave the valley its name, its soil rich and well irrigated, a stark contrast to the drier, less productive land that comprised most of the surrounding ranches. Thomas had worked tirelessly to build it up, and Martha, though never one for the heavy labor, had a shrewd head for business and a fierce protectiveness of their legacy. That protectiveness was now on high alert, a tight knot of apprehension settling in her stomach every time she saw the gleaming black buggy of Mr. Harrison Blackwood, the president of Willow Creek's First National Bank, approaching her gate. Blackwood was a man whose polished boots and condescending smile always seemed out of place amidst the valley's honest grit. He had been a frequent visitor since Thomas's passing, his initial condolences gradually morphing into thinly veiled inquiries about the farm's future, and more recently, outright offers to purchase it. Martha had politely but firmly refused every time. Whispering Willows was not just land, it was her home, her memories, the future she had envisioned with Thomas. She intended to keep it that way. However, Mr. Blackwood was not a man accustomed to taking no for an answer, especially when a valuable asset was within his reach. The railroad was rumored to be expanding through Redemption Valley, and the surveyor's maps had Whispering Willows squarely in the path of the proposed line. Blackwood, with his insider knowledge, saw an opportunity for immense profit, a chance to acquire the land at a fraction of its future value and then sell it to the railroad at a significant markup. His tactics had begun subtly, veiled in concern for Martha's well-being, suggesting that managing such a large property alone was too much for a woman. Then came the generous offers, each one insultingly lower than the land's true worth. When Martha remained steadfast, Blackwood's demeanor had begun to shift, the polite smile replaced by a thinly veiled impatience, the concerned inquiries by pointed reminders of her outstanding mortgage with his bank. The mortgage was a manageable one, diligently paid on time by Martha since Thomas's death. But Blackwood, it seemed, was determined to find a way to leverage it against her. He had begun scrutinizing her payments, finding minor discrepancies in the paperwork, levying late fees for payments that had arrived on the due date, and generally making her life as difficult as possible. Martha, though worried, was not easily intimidated. She had a quiet strength, a stubborn resolve that had seen her through hardship before. She also had friends in Willow Creek, honest folks who respected Thomas and saw Blackwood's predatory intentions for what they were. One sweltering afternoon, Blackwood's buggy rolled up her drive once again, kicking up a cloud of dust that settled on Martha's meticulously tended flower beds. Blackwood, looking impeccably dressed despite the heat, climbed out, his smile tight and insincere. Mrs. Ainsworth, he greeted her, his voice oozing a false cordiality. "I trust you are well?" Martha, wiping sweat from her brow as she tended her wilting sunflowers, met his gaze steadily. "Well enough, Mr. Blackwood. Though the heat is trying." "Indeed," Blackwood agreed, his eyes already scanning the fertile fields beyond her garden. "A fine piece of land you have here, Mrs. Ainsworth. Truly exceptional." "It is," Martha replied, her tone firm. "My husband and I worked hard for it." Blackwood sighed dramatically. "And it pains me to see you burdened with its upkeep, Mrs. Ainsworth. Especially with these rumors of financial difficulties." Martha's spine stiffened. "My finances are my own concern, Mr. Blackwood. And they are in order." Blackwood's smile tightened further. "With all due respect, Mrs. Ainsworth, the bank has noticed a slight irregularity in your last payment. A minor oversight, I'm sure, but technically it constitutes a breach of your mortgage agreement." Martha's blood ran cold. She had personally delivered the payment on the due date. This was a blatant lie. "That's not true, Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice trembling slightly with anger. "I made the payment on time." Blackwood shrugged, his expression one of feigned regret. My records indicate otherwise, Mrs. Ainsworth. And as per the terms of your agreement, the bank is now within its rights to call in the full balance of the loan. Martha stared at him, the audacity of his lies stealing her breath. The full balance was a significant sum, one she couldn't readily access. This was his plan all along, to manufacture a default, to seize her land under the guise of legality. You wouldn't, she whispered, the shock giving way to a rising fury. Blackwood's smile finally vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating look. Oh, but I would, Mrs. Ainsworth. The railroad is coming, and this land, well, it's far too valuable to remain in the hands of someone who cannot manage their affairs properly. He delivered his pronouncement with an air of finality, expecting Martha to crumble, to plead for more time, to perhaps even reconsider his generous offer. But Martha Ainsworth was not a woman who broke easily. Years of hardship had forged a steel core within her. She looked at Blackwood, her eyes blazing with a quiet fury that surprised him. You think you can just waltz in here and steal what my husband and I built, Mr. Blackwood? You think I'm just going to roll over and let you take my home? Blackwood chuckled, a condescending sound. What choice do you have, Mrs. Ainsworth? The bank holds the mortgage. The law is on my side. Martha's lips curved into a small, determined smile. Perhaps you've underestimated me, Mr. Blackwood. Perhaps you've forgotten that a woman who has buried her husband and weathered the storms of this valley is not so easily defeated. She straightened her shoulders, her gaze unwavering. You may think you have a plan, Mr. Blackwood. But so do I. Blackwood raised a skeptical eyebrow. And what, pray tell, is your plan, Mrs. Ainsworth? Are you going to magically produce the full mortgage balance? Martha's smile widened, a hint of steel in her emerald eyes. No, Mr. Blackwood. My plan is much simpler than that. My plan is to fight you. Every step of the way. Blackwood scoffed. A stubborn old widow against the might of the First National Bank? You haven't a chance. Maybe not, Martha conceded, her gaze sweeping across her beloved land. But I'll be damned if I don't make you work for every inch of it. You may think you're dealing with a weak woman, Mr. Blackwood. But you're about to discover that you've made a very grave mistake. The air between them crackled with unspoken animosity. Blackwood, for the first time, saw a flicker of something he hadn't anticipated in Martha's eyes, a fierce, unwavering resolve. He still believed he held all the cards, but a seed of doubt, tiny but persistent, began to sprout in his mind. He had underestimated the widow Ainsworth. And he was about to learn just how costly that mistake would be. The air in Redemption Valley, usually carrying the scent of sun-baked earth and Martha's roses, now seemed thick with a silent tension after her defiant declaration to Mr. Blackwood. He had left Whispering Willows that afternoon with a condescending chuckle and a dismissive wave of his hand, confident that Martha's resistance would be short-lived. He underestimated the depth of her roots in the valley and the quiet alliances she had forged over the years. Martha's plan wasn't one of grand schemes or legal maneuvering that would match Blackwood's financial might. It was a plan born of her intimate knowledge of the land, her understanding of the community, and a fierce determination fueled by the memory of her husband's hard work and Blackwood's blatant dishonesty. Her first step was to talk to her neighbors. She visited Silas and Maeve O'Connell, whose ranch bordered hers to the west, and old Jedediah, Jed, Stone, the town's aging but still sharp-witted blacksmith. These were people who had known Thomas for years, who respected Martha's resilience, and who harbored no fondness for the slick banker and his avaricious ways. She recounted Blackwood's fabricated claim of a missed payment and his threat to foreclose. Silas, a man whose weathered face rarely betrayed emotion, clenched his fists, his jaw tight. Jed, leaning on his hammer, his eyes narrowed behind his thick spectacles, let out a low growl. "That snake oil salesman," Jed muttered. "Always had his eye on your land, Martha. Thomas warned you about him." "I know," Martha sighed. "But I never thought he'd stoop to outright lies." Silas spoke, his voice low and steady. "What do you need, Martha? We'll stand by you." Martha's heart warmed at their unwavering support. "I need witnesses," she said. "Anyone who remembers me delivering my mortgage payment to the bank on the 5th of last month." Jed's eyes lit up. I was in town that day, getting shoes for my mare. I saw you, Martha. Plain as day, walking into that fancy bank of his. Maeve nodded. So did I. I was picking up flour at Miller's General Store. I saw you leave the bank right after. A wave of relief washed over Martha. Blackwood's lie, she realized, wasn't as foolproof as he thought. The small, close-knit community of Willow Creek might just be her greatest weapon. Over the next few days, Martha quietly rallied support. She spoke to Mr. Miller, the general store owner, to Mrs. Gable, the postmistress, to Doc Evans, the town's kind-hearted physician. Each of them remembered seeing Martha at the bank on the day in question and were more than willing to testify to that fact. Blackwood's arrogance, his assumption that no one would question his word, was his undoing. Meanwhile, Martha began her own subtle preparations on Whispering Willows. She knew the land intimately, every dip and rise, every hidden gully and stubborn patch of rock. She spent hours walking the property, her mind working, her plan taking shape. When the official notice of foreclosure arrived, delivered by a nervous bank clerk who avoided her gaze, Martha didn't panic. She simply accepted the document with a calm nod, the fire in her eyes hidden beneath a veneer of quiet resignation. Blackwood, receiving word that the notice had been served without incident, allowed himself a smug smile. He believed Martha was finally realizing the futility of her resistance. He began making arrangements for the surveyors to mark the path of the railroad across her land, eager to finalize the deal that would make him a wealthy man. The day the surveyors arrived, a small group of men with measuring tapes and official-looking documents, they were met with an unexpected sight. Martha stood at her property line, not with pleas or tears, but with a shotgun resting across her arms, her expression resolute. "You will not trespass on my land," she stated, her voice clear and unwavering. The surveyors, taken aback by the sight of the determined widow and her firearm, hesitated. Their foreman, a nervous man named Mr. Davies, stepped forward cautiously. "Mrs. Ainsworth, we have a legal right to survey this land. We have the bank's authorization." "Your authorization comes from a man who is trying to steal my home with a lie," Martha replied, her gaze steady. "Until that lie is rectified, you will stay off my property." Mr. Davies sputtered, unsure how to proceed. He had expected a distraught widow, not a defiant landowner armed with a shotgun. He tried to reason with her, but Martha remained firm. News of Martha's stand spread quickly through Willow Creek. The townsfolk, already sympathetic to her plight, rallied to her support. Silas and Maeve rode over to stand beside her at the property line. Jedediah Stone arrived with his shotgun, a grim determination on his face. Soon, a small but resolute group of neighbors had gathered, their presence a silent testament to their solidarity with Martha. The surveyors, facing a growing and armed opposition, were forced to retreat, their attempts to access Whispering Willows thwarted by the unwavering resolve of the community. Blackwood was furious when he received word of the surveyors' failure. He stormed into the sheriff's office, demanding that Martha and her gang of rabble-rousers be arrested for obstructing legal proceedings. Sheriff Brody, a man who had known Thomas Ainsworth and respected Martha's integrity, listened patiently to Blackwood's tirade. He then leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "Mr. Blackwood," Sheriff Brody said calmly, "Mrs. Ainsworth has a right to defend her property. And from what I hear, there are several folks in town who are willing to swear under oath that her mortgage payment was made on time. Perhaps you should look into your own records a little more closely." Blackwood's face flushed with anger. He knew the sheriff was siding with Martha, influenced by the town's sentiment. He realized that his carefully constructed plan was starting to unravel. Martha's plan, however, was far from over. While she had successfully stalled Blackwood's initial moves, she knew he wouldn't give up easily. She needed a way to definitively prove his lie and secure her ownership of Whispering Willows once and for all. She remembered a conversation she had had with Thomas years ago. He had been meticulous about their finances, keeping detailed records of every transaction. He had mentioned keeping a personal ledger, a backup to the bank's official records, stored in a safe place. That safe place, Martha realized, was the old root cellar beneath the farmhouse, a cool, damp space they rarely used. The next day, While her neighbors kept a watchful eye on the road for any sign of Blackwood or his men, Martha descended into the dusty root cellar. After searching through old boxes and forgotten tools, she found it, a sturdy, leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with Thomas's neat handwriting. With trembling hands, she flipped through the pages until she found the entry for the mortgage payment in question. There it was, clearly recorded, 5th of July, mortgage payment to First National Bank, $150. And tucked into the page, carefully preserved, was the bank's official receipt, initialed by the teller. Martha held the ledger to her chest, a wave of relief washing over her. She had proof. Blackwood's lie was exposed. Her plan was complete. It was time to confront the banker, not with a shotgun, but with the irrefutable truth. The battle for Whispering Willows was far from over, but Martha Ainsworth now held the winning hand.